My name is Ruth. I'm 73 years old, and I never imagined the child I spent my whole life protecting would one day leave me on the side of a busy road like I was something to be thrown away. If you've ever loved someone more than yourself, then you know how easy it is to ignore the warning signs. I raised my son, Brandon, by myself after my husband died. I worked 2 jobs, skipped vacations, and spent every extra dollar making sure he had a better life than I ever did. Watching him graduate college was one of the proudest moments of my life. I truly believed every sacrifice had been worth it. But people don't change overnight. They change one small decision at a time. After Brandon married Nicole, money became the center of every conversation. Bigger house, luxury cars, private schools, expensive vacations. Nothing ever seemed enough. Then one Sunday afternoon, Brandon sat across from me at my kitchen table. His voice was calm, but his eyes felt different. "Mom, I need $1 million. I laughed because I honestly thought he was joking. When I realized he wasn't, my heart sank. I looked him in the eye and quietly said, "Brandon, if I had $1 million, do you really think I'd keep it hidden from my own son?" He didn't smile. He simply stared at me. And for the first time in 43 years, I felt afraid of my own child. The silence between us felt heavier than anything I had ever experienced. Brandon leaned forward and said, "Mom, don't lie to me. Dad always told me you were careful with money. I know you've been hiding something." Those words hurt more than I can explain. "Hiding?" I whispered. "Brandon, I spent my savings helping you through college, paying medical bills, and keeping this family together. There's no secret fortune." Nicole folded her arms and sighed. "You expect us to believe that after living in the same house for 40 years. It wasn't anger I felt. It was heartbreak. I realized they weren't asking because they were desperate. They had already convinced themselves I was lying. For the next several weeks, the phone calls became constant. Brandon kept insisting that I tell the truth. If I didn't answer, Nicole sent messages reminding me that family should help family. The only bright spot in those dark days was my granddaughter, Sophie. She hugged me tightly one afternoon and quietly said, "Grandma, are you okay? Daddy has been yelling a lot." I forced a smile and told her everything was fine. But deep inside, I knew something terrible was coming. I just never imagined how far my own son was willing to go. A week later, Brandon showed up at my house with a smile I hadn't seen in months. "Mom," he said, "let's go for a drive. You need to get out of the house." For a moment, I thought I had my son back. We talked about old memories as he drove. I almost forgot everything that had happened. Then he pulled into a crowded shopping center on the edge of town. "I'll be right back," he said. "Wait here for just a minute." I watched him walk away. 5 minutes passed. Then 15. Then 30. I called his phone. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Blocked. My hands began to shake as I looked around the parking lot. His car was gone. He had planned everything. I was standing there alone with nothing but my purse, my medication, and a thin sweater. No suitcase. No explanation. No goodbye. As tears filled my eyes, I finally accepted the truth. My own son had abandoned me because I couldn't give him the $1 million he believed I was hiding. Just as I started wondering where I would sleep that night, a gentle voice behind me asked, "Are you all right?" I turned around, not knowing that the stranger standing in front of me was about to change the course of my life forever. I turned around and saw a woman wearing an employee badge. "My name is Diane," she said softly. "You've been standing here for nearly an hour. Is there someone I can call?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then the truth came pouring out through my tears. My son left me here. Diane didn't ask questions that would make me feel ashamed. She simply helped me into her car and took me to a senior shelter where people treated me with kindness instead of pity. That evening, my old friend Carol came to see me after Diane reached her by phone. She held my hands and said, "Ruth, you have to stop protecting Brandon. What he did wasn't a mistake, it was a choice." Her words stayed with me all night. The next morning, Carol insisted we visit George, the attorney who had handled my family's legal papers for years. After listening quietly, George opened a locked file cabinet and placed a sealed envelope on his desk. "Ruth," he said, "your late husband asked me to give you this only if Brandon's love for you was ever replaced by greed." I stared at the envelope, my heart pounding. I had no idea what was inside. But I knew my husband's final secret was about to change everything. George carefully handed me the envelope. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter from my husband. "My dearest Ruth, if you're reading this, Brandon has chosen money over family. Don't blame yourself. Some lessons can only be learned through consequences." Tucked behind the letter was another document I had completely forgotten about. Years earlier, after selling a piece of family land, my husband had placed the money into a trust. It had grown over time and was now worth more than $1 million. But there was one condition. Brandon would receive nothing if he ever abandoned, abused, or intentionally neglected either of his parents. In that case, every dollar would be donated to charities supporting homeless seniors and children's education. George looked at me and quietly said, "The trust is legally binding." For the first time in months, I didn't cry. I simply nodded. Brandon had spent so long chasing $1 million. He never realized that the moment he left me alone in that parking lot, he had lost every single penny. And he still had no idea what was coming. A few days later, Brandon finally called. "Mom," he said, as if nothing had happened, "have you thought about what I asked?" I answered calmly, "Yes, I have." He sounded relieved. Then I said, "I met with George." The silence on the other end was immediate. When George explained the trust and its condition, Brandon's voice changed from confidence to panic. "No, that can't be true. Mom, I didn't mean to leave you. It was all a misunderstanding." But the security cameras from the shopping center, my phone records, and witness statements told a different story. There was no misunderstanding. There was only a choice. For the first time in his life, Brandon realized that greed had cost him far more than money. A few days later, we stood in a courtroom before Judge Catherine. She listened carefully to every detail. Then she looked directly at Brandon. "You didn't just abandon your mother," she said. "You abandoned your responsibility." The courtroom fell completely silent as she prepared to announce her decision. Judge Catherine ruled that the trust would be honored exactly as my husband had written it. Brandon had no legal claim to a single dollar. He lowered his head, while Nicole quietly walked out of the courtroom without saying a word. Weeks later, the money was transferred to charities that built housing for homeless seniors and funded scholarships for children who had lost a parent. For the first time since my husband passed away, I felt that his kindness was still changing lives. Then something happened that I never expected. My granddaughter, Sophie, came to visit me alone. With tears in her eyes, she whispered, "Grandma, I'm so sorry. I begged Dad to come back for you that day." I hugged her tightly. "None of this was ever your fault," I told her. At that moment, I realized I hadn't lost my family completely. I had only lost the people who chose greed over love. But one final conversation with Brandon was still waiting for me, and it would become the hardest goodbye of my life. A month later, Brandon knocked on my door. For the first time in years, he wasn't wearing an expensive suit. He wasn't asking for money. He was crying. "Mom," he whispered, "I lost everything. Nicole left. My friends disappeared. I thought money would make me happy, but all it did was make me forget the person you raised." I believed his tears were real. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. I took his hand and said, "Brandon, I'll always be your mother, and I'll always pray for you. But trust is earned, not given." He nodded without arguing. As he walked away, I felt sadness, but I also felt peace. If my story has taught me anything, it's this. Never measure a parent's worth by what's in their bank account. Measure it by the sacrifices they made when no one was watching. I'm Ruth, and at 73 years old, I learned that the greatest inheritance we leave our children isn't money. It's our character. And once character is lost, no amount of wealth can ever buy it back.